everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Deziel, and today I decided to show you how to make a mask. The pattern I graded from extra small to extra large, and I put the pattern available in my Wix site. I'll put the link in the description below this video. This is the mask that I decide to show you today because I think it's the one that has the best fit. It does come from a pattern that my mom found in the newspaper. I decided to do a few adjustments. You could see here that the side is narrower because it was gathering like that and it was leaving the hair or whatever go in. The other thing that I fixed is under the chin. I thought it was too straight, it was open. So I decided to curve it a little bit. Now it's adjust perfectly below the chin. Now about the pattern I propose you today, there is 5 sizes. I'm using the medium for someone like me, normal adult. I use the extra small for my granddaughter and my grandson, 4 years old and 6 years old. And I think if your husband, let's say some guy, they have bigger head, you could go up to the extra large. My pattern is 1 piece for the main fabric that you cut, of course, 1 pair. You have the basic lining piece that is shorter, about 3 to 4 millimeter or a little more than 1/8. This way, if you use different color for the inside, you're not going to see it when it's sewn because it is a little bit shorter. It's also shorter horizontal because it's the main fabric that you will fold and it's going to cover the edge of that one. So we don't need this thickness. I also did an extra pattern piece because some people, they like to put a filter inside. Even if I don't know or understand exactly why would we put filter inside, I did the pattern that you could use instead of the lining, or you could put it in addition. So 2 like that and 2 like that, and you put it over your lining piece so you have an extra layer and you could still put your filter inside. Finally, the last page, you have the main step to assemble your mask. Now, before to go over the sewing step with you, I'm going to answer a question that I got about the fusing. Should we put fusing to our fabric? Personally, I really don't understand why we would put fusing there, because already if you're using fabric that is tight woven like this, or like thin cotton like this with a tight woven, I really don't know how a virus could go through 2 layers of fabric. But if you do want to put fusible on 1 layer or both layers, it's really up to you. Right away, cut many masks. Remember that you need 2 of each piece. This pattern with the opening could be cut in addition of the lining or replace the lining piece. Before to start, last little precision, I wanted to keep it simple, and first I did my pattern no notch at all, but one of my followers gave me some comment and I did agree. I did put notch because it's going to be much easier. First I put the notch to say where to start the lining, and then I put another notch here because you have like a bias line, so it does stretch a bit. And also, when you see the notch, you know that this side is the top of your nose, while the bottom part is much straighter where you have the chin. About the elastic, I wrote to cut it at 65 centimeter. This is for adult. In inches, it's more or less 25 inches and a half. And if you want to do for kid, I cut it at 60 centimeter. And this would be more or less 23 and a half inches. The first thing could vary a little bit. You could start by doing your straight line, but I like to start doing the overlock and it's done. So the overlock would be on the main fabric, just on both sides. If you're using the regular lining pattern, there's no overlock to do here. But if you are using the pattern for the filter, you must do the overlock at the opening and I suggest that you do a narrow overlock. It's easier to control. I did try with the wider one and it's a little harder and it might create pleat. I'm going to sew all the straight area, then I stop and I create little pleat on this side just like that, and I sew a little more, make another pleat, sew a little more, create another pleat. So when you go on the overlock, it's a straight line. And also, maybe you don't see it, but I do pull a little bit to make sure again that I don't create pleat and it's straight, just a little bit. The next seam is going to be to assemble both self piece together, the round area. I indicate the sewing at 7 millimeter simply because it's the width of your foot. In inch, it's 5/16 of an inch. And the reason why we do a smaller seam, it's to make it easier for you to do the open seam, top stitch, or even to press. It will be easier because this is a curved line. But really, the important is just that you do the same thing when you assemble the two self, the two lining together, and if you have the third piece, also always add the same distance. That's the only important thing to remember. The next step is on the main fabric. What I do is I open the seam and I do a tiny top stitch on each side of my line. You will see that I go from the top to the bottom, I turn and I continue, come back the other side. I do it narrow and this way I have a permanent pressing. If you prefer to just press, you just press. For the lining, I decide to do the top stitch only on one side, open seam like that, and it does help me to keep the seam open just like that anyway. If you want to do both sides, it's up to you. You could also do both sides. And that opening the seam and top stitch on one side, you do it also on the second lining piece if you do have it. If you want to put both lining piece, the basic one and the one with the opening for the filter, you're going to put the one with the opening wrong side facing the good side of the basic lining, and you're going to do a little stay stitch all around at 5 millimeter or 1/4 inch. You will see that the bottom part, when you put the overlock one next to the other, it's perfectly the same size as the basic one. Once your little stay stitch is done like that, it's like you have just one piece, so we could easily sew it with the main fabric. Now we're ready to assemble the lining with the self. We're going to place it starting the lining at the notch. You have other notch to match, the center, and you continue until the lining goes to the notch on the other side. Once this seam is done, the top seam is done, here I did with the overlock, but it's really not necessary. You're going to open it and do an understitch on the lining, so the shorter piece, with all the seam allowance, do an understitch at 1 or 2 millimeter, like 1/16 of an inch, on the lining all the way to the other side. And we do that to make sure that the lining is going to be first easier to press if you want to press, but for sure it's going to make it easier to keep it inside so it won't be apparent from the outside. Now you could see that I did quite a few. You see that I did my understitch on the lining, that is the shorter piece. Now to do the second seam, I'm going to put them back face to face like before. This one is the lining with the opening for the filter, only this lining. So I'm going to start sewing, matching the corner with the notch. Start sewing, and at the opening, come and place the second side overlock right next to the other one. Continue until the center, and then again for the second opening, overlock right next to the overlock, and I continue until the notch. Once both sides are sewn, we could turn it to have the good side out. Now, once it's turned, it's time to give a little pressing. You'll see that the top part where we did the understitch, it's going to be very, very easy to press. And the bottom, we didn't have the understitch, so it will be a little harder. You push your seam out to make sure you follow your shape. Then you're going to close the mask, so fold the seam and turn it to cover the unfinished edge of the lining. Doesn't matter if it's a little more, a little less, but the important is to cover the unfinished edge and keep it parallel. You're going to stitch it on the overlock with a back tack at the end and at the beginning, and you do that on both sides. Finally, the two tiny last little seam, it's two tiny top stitch. Again, it's to make sure that the lining is going to stay inside, so place it properly. And you're going to go over the top stitch, one or the other. Just go over the top stitch for a little while, a few millimeters, maybe 1/4 inch. So you do it on top, and you also do it at the bottom to make sure that it's not going to move. Now, once you're done with the two seam, we just have to cut the elastic. I use a narrow elastic, the 3mm or 1/8 wide elastic. I think this is enough. So you cut it. I'm using the loop turner, or you could also use a pin or something else that you have. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top and opposite on the other side, top to bottom, just like that. Put the elastic inside, close it, and just pull until it comes out from the other side. Now we just have to attach it and try it, adjust if needed. Since I give away most of the mask that I did, I'm hiding the elastic inside one side of the mask, just like that. So I hope you'll have at least a little fun doing these masks, because it's a very easy project. And you could use all the little leftover fabric that you have. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I see you soon.